Hey guys, what's up? My name is Gabe and this is Games with Gabe. This is the next episode in the Coding a 2D Game Engine in Java series. In the last episode, what we did was we covered z-indexing and alpha blending, which is a very important feature for a 2D game. In this episode, what we're going to be doing is integrating ImGui into our game engine. So right now you should be seeing something that visually describes what I'm talking about. Basically, ImGui is this whole different graphical user interface, which basically means immediate mode GUI, and it's different from the typical approach, which is a retained mode GUI. And the main difference is, as you can hear in the names, the difference between retained mode and immediate mode, which basically means that instead of building up a whole complicated structure for your GUI and everything, what you can say is declare items in real time that you're going to have onto your GUI, and then have immediate changes affect your real-time application, which is perfect for a game engine where you have real-time needs like this. So it's just the preferred approach for indie game developers, and even Unity uses the immediate mode GUI paradigm because it just works and it's really nice, and you don't have to mess with callbacks and everything, which is really a pain when you need immediate feedback for your GUIs for your games. So I'm going to take a look at a couple different ports for the Java version of ImGui, and I'm going to explain why I'm choosing the one that I choose, and then I'm going to also explain how you can use it with a jar if you want to use a jar. I will mention the other version that does have those easily accessible for those of you who want to use jars or Maven, but I will also tell you why I think that it's probably a better idea to stay away from the other version. Alright, let's get on with checking out the different versions, and then we will actually integrate this into our game engine. Before we actually begin integrating ImGui into our system, I do want to talk very briefly just about the difference in the paradigms. So the standard approach to graphical user interfaces, GUIs, is using something called retained mode. And retained mode basically means you have a tree site type structure that you build up of all your elements that consist of your visuals. And so the most stereotypical tree structure that you can think of is the DOM, the document object model, that is part of websites for HTML and CSS and stuff like that. So they build up this big structure. You have the HTML tag, which has a head tag, a body tag. The body tag can have several div tags. The div tags can have any of the other tags and everything. And you build up this complex structure, which basically says this is how I want to lay out everything, and this is how everything will be laid out, which I'm going to add is super helpful for styling. Like if you want to make a really complex style and make it look nice, this lends itself very well to that because you know exactly where everything should be in relation to other things. But the drawback that comes with this is you no longer have immediate functionality to any one of these divs. You have to go through a very big layer of indirection to see if something happened all the way down this tree. And so to get around that, they come up with these things called callbacks. So if you have a button on your page and you want to check and see if this button was pressed, you have to set up a callback, which in JavaScript is actually pretty nice. It's easy, it's simple, but even in JavaScript, I think it just provides this layer of indirection where you know as soon as this button gets pressed, you want something to happen immediately, but you have to go through this layer of indirection through a callback, which means that when you're trying to trace your code and stuff, all of a sudden you start getting lost as to what's happening because you're like, okay, why is this function getting called? Where is it getting called from? And everything like that. So that's the typical approach to GUIs. Now, ImGui, this is a gross oversimplification, but basically you can think of it as having a list of elements and it rebuilds this list every frame. That's not true too. Smart ImGui systems and everything cache stuff and everything and have ways to get around that. And then to build some sort of structure with ImGui, you would basically say begin, and that would start a window. And then you would say stuff like if button, and this is what the button says. And then you could handle what happens if this button's pressed inside here. And then you could do a bunch of other stuff. You could do scroll bars, edit, whatever, color edits, text edit, everything. And then you just have this end, which says I want to end this function. And so the reason it's called immediate mode is because this is very similar to OpenGL's immediate mode graphics API, but this is not the same thing. It is not like OpenGL's immediate mode graphics API. All this means is that we have immediate access to be able to draw these, but like I said before, if you have a smart ImGui system, it will be caching elements and stuff. But yeah, so that's the basic difference. And as you can see, this is much more succinct, especially in a real-time application where you know exactly what you want to happen when somebody clicks on this button because you just created this window. And like I said before, lots of people discount this thinking that it can't be used in complex systems. Unity. I don't really like the game engine that much for other reasons, but Unity uses ImGui, and it's a pretty complex graphical user interface, right? Like, there's thousands of tools written with Unity. I'll link an article in the description that sort of explains the difference between these two as well, and he's talking in terms of React and Redux. But that's about it for the difference in these paradigms. Now let's actually take a look at some things that we can use to get ImGui running in our game engine. Alright, so the version of ImGui that we're going to be using is originally written in C++, so we are going to be using some bindings to it. Now I'm going to recommend this repository on GitHub just because I tried to use a different one, which I recommend in some of the comments of my last video on ImGui. This one specifically, Kotlin Graphics. And it's not bad. It's not bad, but there were some problems with it that I found irreconcilable. So first of all, in order to use this one specifically, you do have to include the Kotlin runtime library. So it's kind of unnecessary because our whole game engine's in Java. You know, you don't want to have to include a whole nother runtime just because of one library that you're using. So that's my first kind of hit against it. And then my second hit is no matter what I could do, I could not get the fonts working right. And having a different font, especially on my screen, the higher resolution you have, the more important it is that you can rescale fonts and stuff. And for some reason, their true type binding was not working correctly. So I have no idea what's wrong with it, but it just was a pain to start getting together and everything, and that stuff wasn't working right. So if you want to, go for it. You can use this totally. Just remember you have to bind the Kotlin runtime library with it, otherwise it will not work. Now with this one, the problem that a lot of you had was, first of all, it does not have a Maven port, which does kind of stink. And then another thing is some of you wanted to use jars instead of using Gradle, and that's fine. If you do want to use a jar with this, I would suggest cloning this whole entire repository and then building it yourself, because some problems you might face with that is different build versions and stuff. He doesn't have any jars too, by the way. So that means you would have to build it yourself anyways, but that's probably better because then you can have control over which version of Java you're compiling with and everything like that, which is good. Now, if you're just don't want to use Gradle because you don't want to use a heavy-duty editor like IntelliJ or something, let me know in the comments because I can go over a quick tutorial on how to use this without using IntelliJ. It's actually not that bad, and Gradle is actually super helpful. The way I like to think of it is it's sort of like NPM, Node Package Manager, for Java, except a lot smarter, I think, because you can actually do strict versioning and everything like that, which I guess you could do with NPM too, but that's besides the point. So this is basically just like a package manager where you can install packages and stuff, just one easy to use thing. So let me know in the comments if that's the reason that you guys are shying away from this, and if it is, then we can go over that in a separate tutorial. But we will be using this, and the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to copy some of this stuff into our build.gradle file to get this running. So I have our project open right here, and I'm going to go into the build.gradle file because we will be making a few changes to this. Let's go back up to here. You'll notice that they have Maven Central and JCenter. I'm not sure we have both of those. So yeah, we've got Maven Central, but we don't have JCenter. So let's add JCenter up here. Just copy and paste that. And then we'll go back up here once again. These are the two ones that we are mainly concerned with. So implementation, this is all LWJGL stuff, which we already have. Actually, yeah, let's include this one too. This is runtime dependencies, but then this is all LWJGL stuff, which we already have. So we'll copy all that, go back into here, and we will just paste it all right here. And we'll say ImGui stuff. And then we'll go down here just so that we can separate this. This is LWJGL stuff. And we don't really care about the Linux natives or the x86 natives unless you're running on those. And if you are, then please keep those because those are important. Let's go back to here, and he says we should use this version. So we'll copy this, and then up here we'll say project.x.imgui version will be 1.76-0.9, which should resolve this unknown variable right here. And then we should have our runtime natives, and then we should also have our bindings right here for the ImGui library. So then you'll notice his Gradle projects need to be imported, hit import changes, and we should be able to see, well, if you have your build up down here, you would be able to see it, but that just imported successfully. So if we run this, we should still be able to run it with no problems in our Gradle file. Now let's actually look at how we can get this up and running in our project. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here and just create a new class, and I'm just going to call this ImGui layer, just to sort of separate all this code, because the one other downfall of this specific repository is you have to do a lot to get it up and running, but it's really not that bad because he gives it all to you. So it's just a bunch of copying and pasting. We'll click onto that ImGui GLFW example. Do that one more time. So click onto this because this is where he shows us his entire example file, and you'll notice that this is just a giant example of how to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this whole function, and then we're going to start removing stuff too, so don't worry. We're going to copy all of this because this is the init ImGui function, and we're going to go back into here, and I'm just going to copy and paste that all into here, and we will say this is a public function. Okay, and then if we take a look at these errors, these are just import errors. So if I hit Alt-Enter, say import static, and then it'll eventually just import all of them. So that's good. This is a local variable that we will need to get. Window pointer is something we will need. That is just our long number, which is our window ID, basically. And then if we look down here, this load from resources we don't have. I'm just going to comment all of this font stuff out for now. We will be using this in a little bit because I will show you how to change the fonts so that you can use actual nice fonts if you need something else. And then this is a local variable as well, and GLSL version. You can find that just by going into one of your shaders to see which version you are using. So if we go into here, we are using GLSL #version 330 core. So we'll just paste that into there instead. Now let's actually get these local variables, the window pointer and the mouse cursors. First of all, window pointer, that one's kind of easy. When we create an ImGui layer, we will take in a long, and we'll call this GLFW window. And then we will store a private long, and we'll call this GLFW window. And then we will just set it equal in here. So we'll say this.glfw window equals GLFW window, copy that, and we're going to paste that everywhere we see window pointer. So instead of that, we're going to say window pointer, we are going to say GLFW. And what this is this is basically setting up the callbacks for ImGui, which means that we may also have to do some extra work to get our callbacks to work properly because ImGui might consume them. So we'll take a look at all this stuff in the future. Next thing we need is the mouse cursors, which if we go back up into his example, he has a bunch of different things, and we'll notice mouse cursors is one of them. And this is the impl, so we'll get this, the ImGui impl GL3. So we will get both of these, copy them, and then we will go down here and paste it, which is good. And we have no more errors, so that's good. That's the first part. Now the next part, that was just for initialization. We do want to get destroy, and we want to get the loop, which is how we actually render stuff and everything. So let's scroll down to the loop, and you'll notice that he has this ImGui new frame, example UI render, and then ImGui render. Let's copy the start frame, which is this thing right here, and the end frame, which is this thing here, and we'll just copy all this. So start frame and end frame. And then for destroy ImGui, we will, let's just copy all this stuff. So we will copy all that. And we will paste it into here. We're going to get some more errors. We know this is just GLFW window. So we'll copy that, paste that, paste that. And let's actually remove the swap buffers and pull events because we don't want to do that inside of our ImGui layer. We just want to render it. So just take those out. And let's replace all these window pointers right here. Let's take out the clear color because we also don't want to clear the color in here. We just want to do our ImGui stuff. And inside of here, instead of the win width and win height, we're going to say window.getWidth and window.getHeight, which we will implement in just a moment. Then here we will also say window.getWidth and window.getHeight. And then for the mouse pose, we will say these are actually just float mouse pose x equals 0, and then we'll say float. Actually, this is an array. Mouse pose y equals 0 like that. And we'll fix this one too real quick. And the way I know all this stuff too, I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Basically, if you look down here, you'll notice he's using it down here too. So I just noticed that was an array. And so that's probably what we want to use. And then if we look at this function, it says it takes in a long and then a float and a oh, it does not take that. Okay, so it takes in a long and a double and a double. So these should actually be doubles, which is simple. We'll just fix that. There we go. And then we get no problems here. And then the way I knew he was talking about win width, this is just the window width. FB width is the frame buffer width, and we're just going to set that to window.getWidth as well. And let's actually make this even easier too. We'll just say float win width, which he's using as an array. So we'll say win width equals window.getWidth. And then we'll say float win height equals window.getHeight. Yeah, and then we can actually remove these get window size and get frame buffer size. We don't actually really even need those because we will be getting the width and the height from the window directly. So let's implement those functions real quick. They should be fairly easy too. We'll just say public static float get width. And actually, I'm going to change this to an int. So we'll say this will just return get.width. And then we'll say public static int get height return get.height. So we're basically just returning the window width and height in there. Nothing too complicated with these. And then with this, I'm just going to replace this with 1, 1 because this is the scale he's setting, and he's basically setting it according to the frame buffer to the window scale, which we don't really care about because it's going to be the same in our case. Okay, so that was a lot of just sort of random stuff, but according to his example, it's all needed to make this stuff work. But don't worry, we're almost done. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a public void update, and this is going to take in a float dt. And what we are going to do inside of here is basically what he is doing inside of his loop. He says start frame, delta time, ImGui new frame. We'll just copy all this stuff. So copy that, paste it into there. We're using dt, not delta time. We no longer need to cast that. And we do not have an example UI. So we will talk about how we could switch this stuff up and everything too in the future. For now, let's say ImGui.show demo window, which will show their demo window. So we now have this update, we have the start frame, we have this end frame, which is also being called inside of here. And this new frame and this render, which is just all required by ImGui. Okay, let's actually try and set this up and see if it's going to work right. So we'll go into our window. Then at the very top, what we're going to do is we're going to say private ImGui layer, ImGui layer. And then inside of here, after we create GL's capabilities, we'll say this.ImGui layer equals a new ImGui layer, and we will give it the window pointer. And then we will say this.ImGui layer.init. That way we initialize it. Then inside of our loop function, right before we swap buffers, we'll just say this.ImGui layer window.update. And we will pass it delta time. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. There we go. So we get this demo window, which means that we have integrated it successfully. And you see that my mouse is not actually getting picked up by it, which means that we have done something wrong in terms of the mouse callback, because it's not actually getting my mouse. So let's take a look at what's going wrong with that. Okay, so it turns out our mouse is actually working fine. So the only problem is, you'll notice it only works when we're in minimize mode. And the reason for that is because we just have the mouse position being set wrong. So what we need to do is set up a window resize callback. Basically what's happening is right here where we say get the mouse position, it's getting it as if we had the window width and the window height, but we're never changing the window width and window height when it maximizes. So we need to fix that real quick, which means we just need to send up a new event callback here. And what we'll do is we'll just inline it. So we'll say set window size callback, and then we're going to give it the window. Then we're going to give it a lambda expression. And I'm going to take that. And this lambda expression is going to take in a window, a x offset, and a y offset, which should be good. Then we'll literally just say this dot get. We'll say window dot set width, because this is actually the new width and the new height, not x offset and y set offset. Okay, so then we'll say window dot set width new width, and we're going to say window dot set height new height. And then we will create these functions too real quick. We'll just go down to the bottom again, say public static void set width int new width. We'll say this dot get, well, not this dot get, we'll just say get dot width equals new width. And then we'll say public static void set height int new height, and we'll do the exact same thing. There we go. And now every time the window is resized, as in it's maximized or something, it will go through this callback. We will actually have the appropriate width and height inside of these variables, and you'll notice that our mouse is actually working now. Another thing you're going to notice is the text is super small. That is a little bit heavier. If you want to take a look at it yourself, it's going to be inside of this ImGui layer right here where we comment all this stuff out. Try and get this working as an exercise, but unfortunately we are kind of running out of time for today. This was sort of just getting ImGui integrated. We weren't really trying to learn any new concepts in here, but in the next tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to actually start setting up something more than just this demo window. So like you saw in the example, we're going to actually set it up so that we can start using ImGui in our scene and on the active game object, all that stuff. So that is all going to be in the next tutorial, but I hope you guys like this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and I'll try and respond to those in a timely manner. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. See ya.